We would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet to share these conversations on the Vegan Compass podcast.
We extend our respect to elders past and present, as well as any of our listeners and guests. Hello and welcome to the Vegan Compass podcast, unveiling truths, inspiring change. We are your hosts, Ric Allport and Mackenzie Cross.
From wherever you're listening, please be sure to like and subscribe to support this podcast. Now to the episode.
So hi everybody and welcome to our next episode of the Vegan Compass. And I am Ric Allport and beside me is Mackenzie Cross.
Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to introduce Sarah Warner as our guest today on the podcast. She's from a new charity called Growing Plant-Based, and they provide resources for parents and caregivers to raise healthy, happy, vegan kids. So looking forward to talking to Sarah today and hearing all about that.
So welcome, Sarah. Now, our very first question is, who are you and what do you do?
I'm Sarah. And yes, as Mackenzie highlighted, I've founded a newly launched charity, Growing Plant-Based, which sets out to really champion all elements of raising healthy, happy, vegan kids. I'm based in Melbourne, Australia, for anyone who might be listening overseas. And I've been working for about 8 years or so now in the non-profit space within the vegan movement. One of my roles was as the former CEO of Doctors for Nutrition, Australia's health promotion charity, focusing on whole food, plant-based nutrition. And I'm a mum. I have twin boys who are 3 years old and an absolute handful. So I would say that's probably me in a nutshell. I'm also renovating our house, so I'm currently in my fake living room.
It's a really nice fake living room. I like it.
I like it too. It would be nice if this was real. But my life is overall a bit chaotic with renovations, twins, starting a new charity, working.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you worked with Doctors for Nutrition.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I'd get it right somehow. What work did that involve?
So I joined Doctors for Nutrition initially as a volunteer. My background's actually as an accountant. So I joined them managing their finances, and I guess just within the non-profit world, always sort of under-resourced. You sort of just get involved in so many different areas within the organisation. So my role ended up just developing into supporting the leadership and the strategic direction, project development, and ultimately taking on the CEO position, which I recently stepped back from earlier this year. I just mean a part-time position now. So, yeah.
Wow. I don't know how you fit everything in.
I didn't. No, it was tiring. Ultimately, stepping back and focusing on my boys and growing plant-based is sort of, the next steps.
Yeah, that all sounds really exciting. So I was curious to know a little bit about how long you've been vegan for, and were you vegan before becoming a mum, or was that something that kind of came after as a result of having your boys?
So I've been vegan for over 9 years now. So I think it will be my 10-year anniversary next June, which feels like a really big milestone.
Definitely.
So I was, 6 years vegan before having my boys, 5, including the pregnancy, I suppose. And then my husband was also vegan before we had our boys as well. So choosing to raise them vegan has always been something that was fortunately, it was something that we've always been fortunately on the same page with.
Yeah, that makes it a lot easier.
It does.
Yeah, that kind of negates our next question, which was what made you decide to raise your children vegan. But being on the same page and having that, basic, what's the word, underlying ethos, yeah, that would make that decision so very simple.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess even just my personal journey to becoming vegan was really grounded in the ethics. Just learning about what happens to animals in the food system was my primary motivator for many years, and yeah, before I had the boys. But even once I became a mum, I really noticed that shift in wanting to raise them vegan was primarily driven through environmental sustainability and just really protecting their future. So yeah, I found it quite interesting that obviously I'm still very ethically focused and doing it for the animals. But if I think about sort of what my grounding reason is now, it's really the environment and making sure that they've got a world to grow up in. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. We really have to make sure that we're thinking of the future and the future of the planet that we're going to leave behind us. Because with what's happening now, and you look at climate change and you look at the way that land clearing is just destroying habitat of wildlife, you just think, wow, what sort of future is it going to be in 20, 30, 40 years? It's unless we start doing stuff now, we're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really scary, and it was always something that I found really confronting and scary. And I never really got into the environmental side of things before I had my boys, and even now I'm not, but because I just find it so confronting. But yeah, I guess it's just important to raise them in the world that will support them to have that future, that we all want our kids to have, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's scary. It's stressful thinking about it.
I'm so glad you brought that up because as someone who wants to have kids in the future, it is also something that's in the back of my mind with everything that's going on in the world. You do have anxiety about, should I be bringing kids into this world? But some advice that a really good friend gave me was if you don't raise, happy, healthy vegan kids that are in tune with what happens to animals and care about the environment, then there's not going to be the next generation that carries this movement forward. So I like to think of it that way as well.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I felt conflicted, going back and forth, do we have kids or not? And yeah, just as you've just touched on, Mackenzie, I feel like it's almost like the ultimate sign of hope that we will have a sustainable future, a kind world where animals are treated well. And yeah, if we don't raise this next generation, then ultimately, do we believe that world won't exist? So yeah, I sort of see it as the ultimate sign of hope.
So, how did your family and friends react to your decision? Are they on board with it, or is there been kickback?
No, well, I think because I was vegan for so long, it was almost just a given, and I guess yeah, because my husband as well. So yeah, no one's ever really touched on it. It's almost in my world with my non-vegan friends and family, like me being vegan is a bit of the elephant in the room. Let's not bring up the subject. So yeah, for the most part, it's never really come up in conversation at all. Yeah.
Okay, that's really cool.
Yeah, that's good. Because I
Yeah.
think it's probably quite common that people with vegan children might receive, some kind of criticism from their family and friends. So it's nice that you didn't.
Yeah. Oh, well, I guess in saying that, I've probably heard a couple of things not said to me. So maybe, maybe that's probably important. Yeah, like I've, sort of comments around, well, how are they going to, how the kid's going to get their protein and grow and stuff. And
the protein. Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
it's a big one. Yeah. But then it's nice to have been told that, and then also know what that person who told me the information responded with was like, of course they're going to make sure that they are getting the nutrition that they need. And, so I guess there's two ends of the spectrum, sort of hearing some criticism, but then on the other hand, having the support even from non-vegan family members. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's good to know there are other people sticking up for you, even if they're not vegan themselves. It's just
Mm.
it's the logic of, yeah, of course you're going to want to make sure your children are healthy and well nourished, and of course we can get all of the nutrients we need from plants. So
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, overall, I would say there's not been something that's come up in conversation. And yeah, I mean, it's 3 years on. I can't really remember what it was like in the early days sometimes. So yeah.
fair
So
enough.
I guess, have you had, because they're coming to that age where now they're going to parties, is there been any issues with them going to children's birthday parties, or has that been a problem for them?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've gone to a couple of birthday parties for other vegan kids, so that's been really lovely and easy to manage. Um, and then some other parties have been at like play centres or the parks, and so the most part, there's more interesting things going on for my boys at their age, such as just going to the playground and sitting around and eating. But yeah, eating outside of the house is difficult. Dropping them off at, say, their grandparents and having my nieces and nephews there who aren't vegan, but having, obviously, animal-based foods around has been really difficult to navigate
Yeah.
when my boys want the food, and it's like, oh, how can I have this conversation with them whilst my nieces and nephews are also present? Um,
Yeah,
so,
that's very hard to navigate. Those
mm,
like age appropriate conversations where you're trying to talk about what happens to animals, but you also don't want to be too graphic for the sake
yeah,
of the other kids that are there that are not vegan. Yeah, I can imagine that would be really challenging.
yeah, and I would say at this point in time as well, my boys don't quite grasp it either. Like I was like, this has chicken in it, and one of my boys was just like, "That's not chicken," because he knows chicken as a bird, and
Yeah,
yeah,
not a piece of meat in as an ingredient.
exactly,
Oh, that's something I hadn't really thought about either. Like just the innocence of children as well. And if you raise them vegan, then they wouldn't recognize a piece of white meat as chicken versus
mm,
the beautiful fluffy bird that they know.
yeah, exactly,
So I just wanted to circle back a little bit to the nutrition aspect. We were sort of joking about the protein comments.
mm.
But did you feel confident to raise your kids vegan, or did you do a lot of research and kind of prepare yourself for all of that?
Yeah, I really wasn't confident at all, and even now, you know, not really. um, I think even before I was vegan, I've always been really into health and nutrition. Um, and so even without a background in these fields, I would say I'm pretty knowledgeable on good nutrition. And I was always really confident in knowing what I needed to eat. And yeah, eating plant based myself. But yeah, when it came to raising my own kids, I felt really out of depth with what to feed them and what resources to turn to. And things change so quickly in the early years as well, in terms of like their growth and development and what things, you sort of focus on more, and sort of navigating things like fussy eating. Um, so, yeah, it's been a big learning curve for me, and it still is because, things continue to change. And you've got to sort of think of new ways to sort of, open up their palates a bit and get them to sort of be, interested in different foods that maybe they haven't tried before. But even when I felt like I'm doing the right things and I'm on the right path, it's also just difficult to feel confident when, generally speaking, the discourse around raising kids vegan is quite negative.
Mm.
And so it's sort of always in the back of my mind, that narrative that, oh, you can't raise healthy vegan kids. it's not fair to raise kids vegan, and those kind of
But
things
these
that you
these
hear.
people, they're so happy to take their children to McDonald's or
Mm,
Kentucky Fried Chicken, but then they'll poke the finger, point the finger at you for bringing up your kids in a healthy, wonderful environment with cruelty free.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think there's so much work that needs to be done in the movement around changing the conversation and the acceptance around it being healthy.
Well, I think
um,
also we need to
yeah.
be educating young people
Mm,
because you go out and you do outreach to older people and they're very fixed in their mind, and
mm,
it's quite difficult sometimes to be able to change their opinions. But I really think that we should be doing vegan education from a very young age to introduce the fact that we have sentient beings that we don't need to eat anymore.
mm,
So education, school education, really leaves a lot to be desired. And I know your boys aren't in school as yet, but they
mm.
will be soon. So that's going to create other problems.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it is on my mind, how will we navigate that? And um, yeah, just knowing that they'll probably start to hear conflicting information through their education and the curriculum and stuff like that. So yeah, challenging.
Mm.
Definitely. So, okay, we've touched on some of the challenges and the hardest, aspects of raising vegan kids, more so from outside perception. But now I want to turn it on a positive note. So, what do you love about raising vegan kids?
Yeah, I think just my boys and like most kids have such an excitement and amazement for animals. And so I really do love that by keeping animals off of our plates, that we are really honoring this
Mm.
and supporting their compassion. Um, and yeah, just being able to have honest conversations, or well, maybe not for us at this point in time, but knowing that the conversations around what we eat as the boys grow older, yeah, we'll be honest and we won't sort of have to lie um, about where their food comes from.
Mm. No.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's something I experienced as a kid a little bit. I had a very strong connection after watching movies like Babe and Charlotte's Web, um, but I still ate meat for a long time.
Mm.
Well, it's hard because that's what you've grown up with and that's what you're fed because, of course, you eat what your parents put on the plate in front of you
Yep.
and they tell you this is good nutrition. They don't
Mm.
say it in those words, but they will say things like eat your food, this is good for you. Um, they don't mention where that food comes from. So there's that lack of connection between animal and what's on your plate.
Yeah.
So what you're doing, I think, is just absolutely wonderful, and congratulations to you for doing this. But that also brings us to the next question. You've
Mm-hmm.
recently started a charity called Growing Plant Based.
Yeah.
So how did that come about, and what's involved with it?
Yeah, I would say it kind of came about for two different reasons. So first was really just reflecting on my own experience and yeah, feeling really out of depth as I became a mum and had to raise vegan kids. Um, and whilst yeah, there are some really fantastic resources and um, practitioners online who focus on plant-based kids nutrition. What I noticed wasn't so much how to navigate having conversations with kids around vegan topics and yeah, how do you navigate more of the parenting side of things as such? And yeah, really wanting to create sort of a hub where you can access all of this information from one place. The other reason as well was just through my experience working in the nonprofit world and in the vegan movement was reflecting on that a lot of vegan advocacy is really speaking to people who aren't parents and adults. Um, and as a parent, I really identified that my primary motivators are my kids' health and well-being. And so just sort of realizing that more advocacy, if we want to get families on board, should be targeted around, well, what are the benefits of raising kids vegan, and shaping the benefits on offer through, the lens of kids. And so it's, it's pretty much the same messaging, but it's just sort of tweaking it slightly. So it's, about, building the foundations for lifelong health, protecting their world, and, having a future for them to grow up in, and then also just nurturing their compassion and creating a kinder world. So, yeah.
I love that so much. It's definitely a resource that is much needed. I know there are a few nutrition, like plant-based nutrition resources based in the US, but I really don't think we have something like this in Australia yet. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited, and I'm keen for us to get underway with our resources. And yeah.
So, in what ways does growing plant based support families to raise vegan children? You kind of touched on some of the general topics, but did you want to be a little bit more specific about some of these resources that you plan to develop?
Yes. So, of course, the nutrition side of things is really important, and supporting parents in, providing well balanced meals for their kids, and really addressing all aspects of the early life stages, right from like pre pregnancy, all the way through to adolescence. And there's so many different, stages throughout the early life stages that require slightly different focuses. So there's a lot of resources to develop there. And then guidance on having conversations with vegan kids as well. And again, there's so many stages of development, but primarily, you start to, probably have these types of conversations from the toddler years onwards. And it's also just, how can you start to instill vegan values at an early age? And then that leads into starting to have the conversations as your kids start to develop that type of language. Another way as well that we want to support vegan families is supporting parents with the tools to advocate for vegan inclusive environments for their kids. So, like in their schools, their kinders, or other places like recreational centres as well, so that there are options for their kids when they're with their peers. And then this would also just make plant-based eating for families more accessible and open, it up for other families to consider this way of eating as well. But I can imagine it would be really challenging to send your child to school and say the canteen doesn't have any options, and you've got other kids who are able to enjoy getting food from the canteen every now and then. And even, I guess, addressing the education curriculum as well, making sure that there are, I guess, where nutrition is involved, inclusion for vegan kids as well.
Yeah, I'm also curious to know, just talking about school education, I'm wondering about like science classes as well and dissecting animals, because I remember back to being in high school and we had to dissect animals. They actually got stillborn piglets from the local slaughterhouse, and we had to dissect them, and it was horrific.
That would be
So I think it would be amazing to have sort of maybe campaigns targeted at the school curriculum that could help them to look at other options to dissecting animals.
Well, there are other. I've been researching that already, and there are other ways of doing it. So there's already multitudes of videos that are available that you don't really need to be doing it yourself. You can be seeing virtually what happens. So that would be a way of changing what happens in the school environment. So yes, you're not dealing with a dead animal on your bench.
Yeah, and I wonder about maybe some kind of model as well. So you could, pull the pieces apart and see the internal organs, but it's a model of the animal rather than the actual, dead animal in front of you.
Yeah, and I've never actually understood the dead animal in front of you thing, because yes, the model would be perfect, can be reused all the time, and there's no death involved.
Really, the dead animal is just traumatic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think most kids, and I think this is more specific to teenagers, right? The biology with dissecting, um, don't want to do it, even if they're not vegan, because
Yeah.
and I think that just really speaks to sort of that um, uh, cognitive dissonance, really. Um,
Yeah, and how the
yeah.
compassion is kind of like squashed out of you, maybe by your parents growing up, but then also by the school system. So it's such a, I don't know if defiance is the right word, but it is maybe even rebellion. It is kind of a rebellion to raise your kids vegan in this
It
world.
definitely it's rebellion just to be vegan in this world at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
So, what do you think is the future of growing plant based? Because you're here doing it, I'm assuming at the moment by yourself. So, what's the future look like for growing plant based, and how do you hope to achieve everything?
Yeah, well, I do have two other directors on the board, so I'm feeling supported that way. And yeah, we're all doing this together. But yeah, the future for growing plant based, I really, really just hope to create a community where vegan parents feel supported and confident in their parenting choices. And even just to know that they're not alone, because it can often feel that way when raising vegan kids if you don't have that community around you. And yeah, definitely when you're raising kids differently to what is the norm in a non-vegan world can feel really challenging. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm sure our listeners, like me, are just feeling really inspired that there's something like this out there for the future, the next generation. Um, so, if people want to support you, how can they do that? Like maybe donating or volunteering, or ways that they could collaborate with you, for example?
Yeah, well, I think that the top way at this point in time could just be giving us a follow on social media, just helping us build our online presence and grow our voice, grow our reach. And yeah, if anyone feels like compelled to volunteer, we would love to have you on board. We've got so much to get underway with. And yeah, it's challenging. We're currently just a very small volunteer team.
And I guess you
um,
probably need people in all aspects. So, people who could be graphic artists or video creators or anything along those lines.
Yeah, those things would be absolutely amazing. And even just in developing some of our resources, really leaning on professionals within their fields. So, dietitians, doctors, to support our health and nutrition content. And then childhood educators and childhood or psychologists who sort of specialize in childhood development to shape the resources around how to have effective conversations with kids, because we need to make sure that it's age appropriate and developmentally appropriate, and we really want to instill sort of hope and empowerment in the next generation.
That's just amazing, and I wish when I was growing up, which I'm a lot older than you two wonderful people, I just wish there was something like this going on in school because it would have changed the whole world basically. So congratulations again on what you're doing. How do
Thank
people
you.
get in contact with you? What's your name on social media? What's the best way?
Yes. So our Instagram tag is at growing plant based, and the same for Facebook. And then you can reach us at our website www.growingplantbased.org. So it's very simple, just growing plant based, all one word.
We'll put that in the show notes as well.
Okay,
Amazing.
great.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Was there anything else that you wanted to mention today before we wrap things up?
No, I think that's all good.
Well,
Amazing.
thank you so much for being with us today, Sarah. We have absolutely loved hearing from you and your story and your vision for the future. We can't thank you enough for giving us your time.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Well, folks, that brings us to the end of this wonderful episode. And again, thank you to Sarah for being with us. But we will be back again with a new episode coming soon.
Stay tuned.
Bye. Thanks for listening to the Vegan Compass podcast, unveiling truths, inspiring change.
Be sure to follow us on social media at @thevegancompass_podcast. See you next time.